Good evening and welcome back to Deep Images. On the heels of our Hallows Eve 2024 coverage, we are beginning a brand new horror-centric series. This time around, we'll be tackling vampires. Regarding this sanguine subject, we will be discussing some of the usual suspects that we have not gotten around to in the past, and some very unusual suspects. So, some classics, some obscurities. Joining me in this first blood-soaked session will be these amazing folks. Co-hosts C.F. Roberts and Justin Cotton, veteran panelists Bill Mulligan, Francis Chu, and Briggy Williams, and awesome newcomer Aaron Garland. And I am Henry Covert, so please join us as we begin season 4 of Deep Images. It would not be possible if not for you guys. If you would drop a like and subscribe to the channel, it would help us out tremendously. So let's get into it.
Okay, so 1972, the Orpheum Theater in my hometown had fallen on hard times. This place opened up, I think, in the early 1900s as a vaudeville stage, and
Is this the
later
Orphe Lyceum, or am I thinking of a different country?
it was called the Orpheum. It was beautiful, had architecture and everything, but things just weren't working out. So they switched over to adult films. This is back when there actually were adult films. They were terrible, but they did have plots. They tried. The plots weren't great. It might be, I don't know, a girl orders a pizza, doesn't have the money to pay for it. It kind of writes itself. But point is, they showed these movies with some people who actually had some acting chops in them, who thought that they do this, they get some money, enough to pay the rent and their heroin dealer, and then these movies would eventually just disappear after a few weeks and get turned into guitar picks, and they never have to hear from it again. And most of them got typecast for life because yeah, they never went away. London After Midnight's gone, but by God, Devil and Miss Jones is still out there and forever. Yeah. So anyway, the Orpheum was showing this, and I
Behind the
was
green door. What was that? Behind
yeah,
the
behind
green
the
door.
green. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Marilyn Chambers, she sold Ivory soap, and then she's making porn films, and
I
they're
just
like
heard. I heard on the
scandalized.
street.
If you had one of those boxes of soap, by the way, it's worth a lot of money.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. It
Wow.
doesn't even have to have soap in it because that's not what they're collecting.
It just has to have Maryland on the front.
Right, So you should say, just to show you should save everything. Throw nothing out. One day the dark secrets of Captain Crunch might come out. If you've got one of those original Captain Crunch boxes, who knows? So anyway, they showed porn films. Well, I was 12 years old. I wasn't going to see any porn films. But then in a brilliant move, they started showing horror films on the weekend. So
Wow.
I mean, this is just absolute greatness because we got to go to this theater and giggle at these posters they had for A Touch of Genie and Seven into Snowy and all these other golden age classic porn films. They didn't show any of the coming attractions. That would have been amazing. But they showed some pretty good movies. In fact, what they showed was a lot of Hammer films. But our parents were still under the impression that they were dropping us off to see something like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and, the incredibly mild creatures who, vaguely kill people off screen or something. And we get in there and it's Countess Dracula and Vampire Circus. And the reviews were like, oh, Vampire Circus is terrible, but Countess Dracula has a little bit of class. Countess Dracula has Nigel Green and Ingrid Pitt, and those are two of my favorites. But it ain't a patch on the patootie of Vampire Circus. So Vampire Circus starts, and within 5 minutes, we see this attractive, bosomy British woman take this adorably cute young girl into the castle of whatever, Castle Mittenhouse, I think it is. Terrible name for a vampire. And he's just, oh, he's a dick. Of all the vampire, this guy is so, oh, you just want a most punchable face you can imagine. And yeah, and then all of a sudden the girl's dead, the kid's dead. We're like, what the what? Yeah, this little girl is dead, and the two of them are naked in bed. I'm like, this is not Frankenstein meets the Wolf Man. This is us meeting puberty.
That would
This
be kind
was
of
we
cool
were
if it was, though.
It was like a whole, we were filled with 12 and 13-year-old kids. The oldest one there was 14, and even they were like, yeah, I think that's what it's supposed to look like. And we could not believe it. And we all made a blood pact right there to never tell our parents about this because we would never get here. And we were gonna be here all October. It's like this is what we're gonna be doing for the next few weekends. Um, so Vampire Circus, I saw it once there. And to give you an idea of the impression, it was okay. It was over 30 years before I saw it again. And as I'm watching this with my wife, because as soon as it was available, it was one of those things they never showed it on TV, ever, ever. A lot of Hammer films kind of slipped through the cracks. And I managed to get a copy of DVD and I'm watching it with my wife and I was telling her the story. And as we're watching it, I'm like, okay, there's a scene coming up where we are going to see a splash of blood against ferns. And she's looking at me like that's a very oddly specific memory. And by God, there it was. This movie imprinted itself so deeply on my brain as I'm watching it. It's all coming back. And I've got a memory like a sieve. Okay. I can't tell you what I had for dinner yesterday. But this movie that I had seen once, I don't know. Boy, it was really, really deep in there, like a song you can't forget. I love this movie. It's great. So the plot, and now this is later Hammer. This is Hammer flailing time. It's the 70s. Night of the Living Dead punched them hard in the belly, and the Exorcist was going to knock him out for the count. There was no interest anymore in the classic Gothics. Hammer films that had seemed when they first came out were so outrageous and controversial and bloody and just a symbol for everything that's gone wrong with the world were now tame. They were so tame, and their day was leaving. They tried to spice it up with a little bit of sex and more, a little more nudity, little lower cut dresses, lots more blood. But the writing was on the wall. But I love these last few things when they're just throwing pictures against the wall to see if anything would stick.
Hmm.
There's the desperation, the flop sweat of they are beginning to lose money and they're just trying to find that formula and they never did. It's a shame, but there's just a wonderful almost dignity in this failure that's going on, one thing after another that just did not work, but they tried. They went out swinging. I got to give them that. Vampire Circus is great though. So, okay, so this jerk vampire kills this little kid. We're all traumatized. The village people show up, not the band, the actual people of the village show up with their pitchforks and those weird rakes. I don't know what they were supposed to do, and torches, and they kill the vampire pretty easily. This is a theme that goes on in a lot of these movies. It's always building up to the big confrontation with the head vampire, and then he goes out like a bitch. I mean, really, it doesn't take much. You don't even need Peter Cushing, who would do it with panache, but they take him out. But with his dying breath, he snivels out something like, "I will curse your children," and blah, 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 blah. And the people stand around listening to him, and they should just lop off his head and stuff his mouth full of garlic flowers. The wife, okay, so it turns out the wife of one of the villagers, she's the one who brought the little girl there. So they make her run through the gauntlet and they're beating her. And I think we're supposed to feel kind of bad about this. I didn't feel bad at all. Little girl was cute as a button. I cannot emphasize enough how cute this little girl was. And they ate her. She should have been burned at the stake. As she runs into the village as they blow it up with convenient dynamite or whatever they had back then, and that's the prologue. 30 years later, no, I don't know, 15 years later, um, there's a plague in town. The village is completely sealed off. No one's allowed to leave, and a circus comes into town. Yay, a circus, the night circus. They don't call themselves the vampire circus because, as dumb as these villagers are, even they would probably figure that out. But it's pretty obvious these people are sketchy. There's a dwarf clown, so if depending on your phobias, this might be a twofer. There's very close twins who are acrobats. They there's a gypsy lady who's really beautiful, played by Adrienne Corey, who was the victim of Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange.
Hmm.
She's the rape victim, the wife of Patrick was it
Okay.
McGee? Yeah.
Hmm.
She's great at this. Boy, she's hot.
Hmm.
She's also the wife. I don't know exactly how they pull that off, but she's the wife, but she does it. She's not the same actress. She's a different actress. Must be some vampire hoodoo. And sure enough, they put on their circus. There is a scene, talk about imprinted in my head, where a leopard woman comes out. She seems to be totally nude, but I think she's wearing body paint. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm pretty sure she's wearing body paint because once I got a copy of this, I did it frame by frame by frame. Um, yeah, and she does this erotic dance, and it's so cool. And we're all if they had taken a picture of us out in the theater, we would have looked like the people in the producers, the audience, just our mouths hanging open, our eyes really wide. We just could not believe that our parents had dropped us off here. We did like, man, this was great. There's acrobats who like flip back and forth on trapezes and turn into bats. Okay, again, at this point, I'm starting to think, yeah, these villagers, I know they're starved for entertainment because they're blocked off, but you know that vampires are real. You killed one, and now you got acrobats turning into bats. They might be afraid to say something because the strong man is really strong because he's played by David Prowse.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we've got a hell of a good cast here. And then one by one, they start killing off the children, just like, you know, what's his name? Old Mittenhouse. Is really his name? I gotta look this up. No, Count Mitterhouse. Terrible name. Count Mitterhouse.
Yeah.
I've got you now, Count Mitterhouse. um, what's cool about this is they're playing around with the vampire tropes, which they also did with Captain Kronos. Like there's some rules in here that don't really apply to most vampires. Like the twins are like the Corsican brothers. It's a male and female twins. When one of them gets a big crucifix shoved through her heart, the brother also has a gaping wound, which doesn't really sound to me like any kind of advantage. That's always what's got me about vampires. They're really arrogant. They're always like, "Hey, I can do this. You are as the bleeding of puny ants to me," and everything. It's like, dude, everything can kill you. Literally everything. Things that don't even bother me in the least, like putting garlic salt on my French bread and the sun, the warmth of the sun. But they kill you. So just shut up. So that's their big thing. The one guy can turn into a panther. That's pretty cool. There's all kinds of good stuff. And eventually we get down to they've revived Count Mitterhouse. There's a big fight there, not with him, just to get him revived. And then in like I think it takes 11 seconds, he sticks his head in the middle of the guy's using a crossbow as a cross. This is the other thing I like about vampires. They're so afraid of crosses. You literally can just do this with your fingers and kind of ward them off. It's like, yeah, tell me again how superior you are. You know, if I'm facing a werewolf, I'm scared to death because I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Mummy, I could probably outrun. Even I could outrun a mummy. A werewolf, there's just no chance. And
What about a
Frankenstein,
zombie?
I know enough about zombies. I'm your go-to person if there is a zombie epidemic. Just give me a call and I'll give you some tips.
I'm on it.
This is not going to be like a Fulci movie where the guy like shoots the zombie 7 times before he thinks to hit him in the head.
Right.
And having learned his lesson, the next zombie shows up, shoots him again, keeps shooting him in the chest. It's like, dude, I know you're in a Fulci movie, but these are the slowest zombies ever. They're almost walking backwards. But anyway, but a vampire, yeah, I can hold my own against these hammer vampires.
Where can I jump in? Like
Please, I'm gonna just rant forever.
The trope about inviting the vampire in, like you can't come in unless you invite him in.
Yeah.
Where did that? Do you know where
that's very old. I mean, this goes back. Vampires, a lot of what we think of vampires is sort of invented from Dracula and Carmilla and these others. But
Right.
vampires were basically considered revenants. They were just the dead that came back. The feeding on blood thing and a lot of this other stuff has been added, but that's been a long time thing. Homes were considered sacred. Homes had a kind of a magical property of their own, and therefore evil could not cross the threshold unless you invited them. And if you invited them, then that was it. And you couldn't disinvite them. It's a big deal. But I think that was part of the whole thing of people, hospitality was a big deal back in the old days. You know, you weren't supposed to red wedding people. If you invite them to your house, even if they're your enemy in the house, everyone has to behave under certain rules and everything. So I think
Mhm.
that was part of that whole thing, that be careful who you invite into your house, because once you do, you're obligated to serve them well. That's probably where that comes from. You know, the
Yeah, because
idea of,
there are like emotional vampires sometimes,
yeah,
and well, there are not sometimes, and they are well, many of them are in your home.
oh, the
Many of them
difference between, yeah,
you
the
grew
difference
up with.
between them and other vampires, those are real.
Those are real vampires,
Yeah.
certainly. Yes, they
Ugh.
do suck the life out of you. So
So
yeah.
anyway,
Hmm.
old Count Mitterhouse here sticks his head inside the crossbow, and then they just thwang it, and it cuts his head off. The end. I mean, he really is not much of a threat once they get there. Same thing happened in Twins of Evil. We keep building up that this is a big deal, and then just they almost like walk right into the stake. You know, they're stupid
Oh,
like that. Um, this is just a lot of fun because you've got all these cool little bits and pieces here. This movie should not have been any good at all. The director didn't really do a whole lot of other stuff. I don't think he did any other horror. The writers didn't do a whole lot of other stuff. It was a troubled production. Because the director was kind of new to all this, he took way too much time, and so they were just got to the point where they're tearing out pages of script to not film. So not all of it makes sense, and yet it really does work. And it's interesting, Henry, that you started with Jean Rollin, Gene Rollins, who this film kind of makes me think like Hammer was kind of going for that. And in fact, the poster for both this and Countess Dracula has that very interesting cartoon, highly graphic, stylized look to it. It's the closest thing they did to one of Roland's films.
same
So
era.
yeah, and it's really worth a look. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't have a cast. It doesn't look like a typical Hammer movie. I love Hammer, but
Uh,
clearly they were going for something else here, something different, and I
mhm.
think they absolutely achieved it. It's one of I think their last unreservedly good films.
Yeah, I agree.
So now where it's playing, I do not know. It was for a long time, like I said, I kept wanting to see this film because it was such a memory, a childhood memory of mine. And
It's on Tubi.
thank God for Tubi.
I
You
saw
know
it on
what?
there yesterday.
I just checked it. It's on YouTube too,
Oh,
but with
hope it's a good.
ads.
Well, that's all right. It's definitely worth seeking out. It moves fast. It's a lot of fun. The only complaint I have, and this is true for a lot of the Hammer films, after a certain point, protagonists are not interesting. I could not give a yellow rat's ass about most of the heroes and heroines in Hammer films after a certain
Mm.
point. I'm rooting for Peter Cushing 100%. If he's in it, he's except for Twins of Evil, where he's actually kind of a bad guy, but you're still rooting for him because he's the most interesting person there, and he's just such a great performer. But these generic heroes, a hero and his girlfriend who gets captured and he has to rescue him, I don't know their names. I don't really care. I am rooting for them because I root for humans over vampires, but I don't really have an emotional attachment to them. Tell you the truth, the gypsy woman who turns out to be the woman from the beginning, who's now evil, but she does kind of resist when they're trying to kill her daughter. So even she has at least a little bit of a redemptive arc, although it's not enough to make up for the fact that she killed that adorable little girl. So if you like your vampires evil and a little bit stupid,
Yeah.
but with some, as I do, but with some cool powers and a nice splash of Hammer had the reddest blood of any horror film. Kensington Red, they called it. It looks about as much like blood as poster paint, which I think is what it was used for. But it's great. It's great, and good production values still. You know, it's getting toward the end, but production values are good. A lot of fun. I cannot recommend enough.
Yeah.
But sadly, unless there's some 12-year-olds watching this, and 12-year-olds of today have probably been exposed to more stuff than I can even imagine, you're never going to get that thrill that I had that day in that theater. That was my eyes were open. There is more to life than just the universal horror films. And I never looked back.
Okay.
Quiet on set.
Right,
We're back with
right,
Deep
right, right.
Images. We're talking about vampires as part of our Halloween 2024 coverage.
Mm.
We're going to let Briggy Williams talk about a classic vampire film.
Oh, excellent. Hey, gang. Okay, so the movie I'm going to review for you today is Captain Kronos Vampire Slayer, which I think is such an amazing vampire film, 1970s genre hammer film. I would suggest strongly just off the rip, just taking a look at it. I found it on YouTube. I was into vampire films, and then this one just sort of came across my feed, and I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to look at this." And once I did, I said, "Okay, I'm going to have to present it for tonight for your viewing pleasure." So let's get into the cast. It's also an English film, so there is that. It's not the typical.
It's above average for a Hammer film, in my opinion.
It's above average. Yeah, I would say for a Hammer. Thanks for throwing that in there. So, um, Hurst Johnson is in it. Shane Bryant, Caroline Monroe is in it.
Oh, wow.
John Carter's in it. A lot of really good English actors
Who
are
is the
in it.
director? Is it Brian Clemens? Or am I wrong with that?
Brian Clemens is the director. He's a director, and he was also the writer. And he also co-produced
Go
with
Brian.
Albert Fennell. So it's really good. So, but if you don't know, Brian Clemens also wrote for the Avengers. Are you familiar with the Avengers?
Oh,
It
yeah.
was
No.
Before the
Mrs.
Marvel, there was the British Avengers.
Mrs. Peel. I mean, if you know Mrs. Peel, like
Childhood crush.
she was badass.
I think
Yeah,
Clemens
so-
also wrote a little for Doctor Who.
Oh, yes. I
think.
think Doctor Who as well. So this movie takes place like in this small English village. And all of a sudden there are these women that are found dead. There's a doctor that's the local doctor, and he doesn't know why these women are dying, but it's the way they're dying and the way that they're found and the condition that they're found in that sort of got him to call Captain Kronos to come in, and he's already known far and wide for being this very debonair captain that comes in. This movie kind of has a different elements. It's very multi-layered. It's a vampire film. It's a swashbuckling film. Also, there's a lot of sword play in this movie. It has kind of like a little bit of everything in it. There are very beautiful women, very helpless fair maidens who are not getting the life sucked out of them through blood, but whoever is in this town is sucking their life force and taking their beauty. So they're found dead in the woods with just wrinkled and old. And these are very young women, but so they don't know what's going on. I have to also go back and talk about, let me just go back and talk a
That's a
little
bit
bit
novel for
about,
vampire movies.
that's what I'm saying. It's not your typical, there's not a lot of blood in here, but I found a little bit of a sensuality in that whoever this was stealing their beauty and their youth. And Caroline Monroe, who people may also know in the Golden Age of Sinbad.
Golden Voyage of Sinbad, yeah.
It's Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Yeah, she was also in that, and she was also a Bond girl as well.
She was in Maniac with Joe Spinell. She's been in a lot of horror movies.
Yeah, she's been in a lot of good. She's very beautiful.
Dark-haired woman.
Dark hair, yeah.
Okay.
Dark brown, yeah.
No, there are at least 3 women in that movie. I can't remember which.
Marilyn Monroe is probably the most famous actress, and I mean, she's still got a cult following and still does conventions, and by all accounts, she's really sweet.
Yeah. She really does. And she'll talk about like her movie days, what she was up to, how she got into the movies as well. Just beyond being just physically beautiful, she's also, a good actress. So she lends well to the genres that they put her in.
She's in Dracula AD 1972.
Yes.
Which I think is a great one.
I do not know that.
Cut. Right. Have you seen that movie?
I've not seen it.
That?
I've seen it.
Oh,
I've seen Kronos, but I've not seen that other one.
Oh, okay. So these women so she's in it as well. She becomes lovers with Captain Kronos because why not?
Yep.
There's some pretty steamy sex scenes in there, but the way they shot those scenes were, I guess, in my opinion, the less you show, the more your imagination goes there.
Yes.
And I love that about this particular sex scene. They do become lovers, and it's a lot of yeah, it's a, a lot of shadow play, I'll put it that way, in this movie regarding that. So,
Or what Rhiannon calls shadow sex on this channel.
is it called shadow
That's what
sex?
she calls certain kinds of sex
Is
scenes.
is that what I something I should look into? Okay, so anyway, so they go around the town trying to figure out why these women are being sucked of their life force. And of course, like all vampire slayers, he has a sidekick who has a hunchback because why not? But he's also a professor, and he's brilliant, but he is a hunchback. But he kind of deals with it. So as hunchback goes, and it kind of reminded me almost like Young Frankenstein in a
Oh,
way.
Marty Feldman.
Marty Feldman, but it wasn't played for laughs like that. But it was actually just kind of funny because you could
It
see,
was.
like, in the movie, this thing, that's not really a hunchback. It's got like probably dirty laundry under there. I have no idea. But anyway, he was, he was, so, so they go around the village talking to different people, trying to get witnesses, but more women are being killed. There's a family that's pretty well off that lives in the town, and about 9 years prior, the father of this wealthy family was also killed by this vampire. And so they go and put flowers on their grave. The mother is there, but now she's old because the stress has just ravaged her also physically. So there are two siblings that take care of her. And so they're adults. And they also are also afraid of her because now they're afraid of getting old themselves.
Hmm.
And so they take care of her. They try to feed her. The mother hardly ever eats. And Kronos is trying to figure out why the doctor also tried to help this woman, couldn't do anything. But on his way home through the woods, this shadowy figure in a hood and a cape attacked him, the doctor. And I don't think the doctor remembered. There's a level of necromancy that's going on. So,
Mhm.
so people are being mesmerized, hypnotized, and not remembering that they have actually been either bitten in some way. In this, you could be bitten, but not have your life force taken. And that's what happened to this doctor. But then, as this doctor was, I think, shaving or something, he looked at his reflection in the mirror and then saw this evil come over him. So he runs to Kronos and says, "Look at me, something has happened to me. I don't understand what's going on." Come to find out, all of these fangs come out. They tie him up, the assistant and Kronos tie him up, and the doctor is saying, "You have to kill me because I'm only going to kill people." So they tie him up. They get a stake and they drive it through his heart, and nothing happens. Now, there's something I want to talk about here. In all of the vampire movies where a stake is driven through the heart, there is sort of a level of eroticism to me regarding that, sort of like a penetrating.
Penetration.
It is, yeah.
Is
You
that
really get it in Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, there's always like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this, like the final release, there's
Yeah.
always,
The small
there's
death.
always, yeah. There is sort of like this, that I've always found very intriguing throughout all of vampire movies. But anyway, as they try to put the stake through his heart, nothing happens. Nothing, it doesn't penetrate at all. So then they said, okay, we can't kill him this way. Let's hang him. So they've got him in a chair. They get a noose. And then they're like hoisting him up, and he's just sort of looking like, okay, what else? That sort of
Why
thing.
doesn't the stake kill him? I forgot.
Well, the stake doesn't kill him because
The
there are
stake would
different.
kill a non-vampire.
Yeah, but because of, I have something else to say about that too regarding something that was said in a prior review. The different vampires have different levels of strength. And because of that, some will, like in Interview with the Vampires, some could levitate, some could read minds, some can turn into a mist, some can do different things. And from what I got was like the older these vampires are, the longer they've been around, the longer they're able to master their dark gifts, that they're able to then either transcend and do things that other vampires couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just sort of as an aside, as I've seen the vampire lore expand, like the Anne Rice vampires, Interview with the Vampire. Some vampires could do certain things, some were stronger, some were not as strong. So I'm sort of thinking this is well before that, but this particular genre of vampire was not able to be killed with a stake through the heart or hung. So the professor goes to the fireplace and says, okay, we're going to just burn this guy and see what happens. And so as they go to burn him sitting in this chair, he kind of jumps back. And when he did, he had a cross on, and the cross penetrated into his solar plex, and that killed him. Now it was the right, so it was the cross, but the cross was also made, I think, of some like silver, steel, okay. So when that happened, that's what killed him, and then he was immediately like 100 years old, and they said, okay, this is what we have to do to kill these vampires. Now we understand. So they went to a cemetery, and they got like all of these. They got metal and the sidekick, the professor, along with Caroline Monroe, they make this sword, and this sword looks like a giant cross. And so this is the sword now that he's using he's going to use to fight these vampires. But what they decided to do, they discovered where the vampires were living. I won't give that part
That's what
away.
I can't remember at all.
Right. Yeah. But I'll let you look at it and figure out how they figured that out. So once they did, they went to the home of the family, the wealthy family. They used Caroline Monroe as the bait because she's a young, beautiful maiden. And somehow she gets into the house because she was outside, and she tells this story. My father wants me to marry this man and I don't want to. And can I stay here the night? And they said, hey, of course. Like, why not? So she winds up staying there because that's what happens. So she wound up staying there that night. And at this point, I'm thinking it's the two siblings that are the vampires. So they go to bed, and then you see someone coming down the stairs and hypnotizes the young maiden. And when the camera pulls back, you see that it wasn't the sister or the brother, but it was actually the mother. And all this time, she was wearing like this death mask. And she was the one that was going out and killing all of these people, sucking the blood of these people. And she had put the young maiden under a trance. And so when all of this happened, the siblings come downstairs and they're like, wait a minute, like this is creepy. Like, what's going on here? And she says, look, I needed to stay young, and this is how I was going to do it. This is also your legacy as well. You never have to get old. You can live forever. And I also, guess what? I also got your dad back from the dead, and he's here too. So the father comes out. He was the one that was wearing the cloak. It's crazy. The cloak, that was the guy in the forest that was sucking the life out of the maidens, like on their way home. So he was there doing, so it got really wild, really, really fast. I mean, should I continue? Should I tell you the rest, or should I just let you go and watch the rest of the movie?
Keep going.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, it's really, really good. I mean, the way, again, there's a lot of swordplay. I thought the action was really good. I also thought that for a movie for its time, that it didn't lean heavily into the typical vampire, the tropes. It did not go there at all. So
Trying to
it
be
really,
different.
Yeah.
right. So it really keeps you on your toes. It really keeps you wondering what is going to happen next. I happen to um, find that even there were some, it kind of reminded me, a scene reminded me also of an old Western where there are like these three guys in a bar and they get into a fight and then Kronos comes
Yes, there's that.
in and right, it has even that element of it too. So it didn't really catch on, I think, because again, it was a vampire movie, but it wasn't a typical blood and gore vampire
Mhm.
movie. And then it was also a swashbuckling movie. And then it was also a Western kind of thing. And somehow it all came together really, really well. And I think that if people watch this, give it a chance. It's only an hour and a half. What would I give it? Let's see. We were doing ratings before. So I'm going to say for me, for the time, I would say maybe like an 8
Out of
or a
10.
7. Yeah, out of 10 because of the originality. It's not taking the audience for granted. I thought that the filming, the cinematography was well done, all of that. So yeah, I thought it was really good.
It has a pretty big
It is a
following now. It wasn't one of the more
Hmm.
popular Hammer movies when it came out. I don't think it was
Hmm.
unpopular, but
Right.
yeah, it's pretty highly regarded now. I think I was going to say I think a lot of the I think it had a lot of influence on the and maybe some other movies did too, but I think it had a lot of influence on the cinematic Blade, not the comic book
Hmm.
Blade. The comic book
Hmm.
Blade, walked around with wooden teak knives,
Hmm.
that were like this long.
Right.
He didn't walk around with silver swords like Captain Kronos, but Wesley Snipes'
Hmm.
blade does. And so then
Right.
later they, added. I mean, in Wesley Snipes' blade, silver is more important than wood. But in the
Hmm.
day when the comic blade first introduced, wood was the main thing, and the silver was kind of also something that could do it. But in the
Right.
Snipes movies, it's mostly silver oriented stuff, and
Right.
some wood, some holy water, but definitely that
Yes.
silver,
Yes.
all silver blade, samurai swords. That's kind of, but I think Captain Kronos was probably the first vampire hunter that used those that I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there wasn't anything like holy water. Again, they didn't go with the typical vampire tropes. It was very much leaned heavily on um, like the sword play and I guess, like I said, necromancy and some other sorts of sorcery to find out
you
who
know
the vampires were.
I think if it
that
hadn't been
the thing
toward the
that struck me.
Hmm.
is
Sorry.
it? Oh no, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think
Okay, I
if it
was going to
hadn't been
say,
toward the Twilight of Hammer, it might have had a few sequels.
Hmm.
yeah, it was supposed to have sequels actually, and then for some reason it just sort of like flopped, and they just decided not to make any sequels. But the thing that struck me about this was like I think that it was influenced by two things, at least two things.
Hmm.
There was a lot of swashbuckling movies that I'm like I think the Three Musketeers was made around that time. And then you had these female vampire movies that were made by Hammer. And Henry, you probably know those titles better than me, but there
Hmm.
were some that featured Ingrid Pitt, and she played a female vampire.
Hmm.
And what I find really striking about this is that it seems almost like a class commentary. You have all these wealthy women who are trying to look as young as possible.
Right.
And of course, what do they do? But they suck. I mean, they
But that
overwork lower class women.
but that's
We're
all
working.
based on a real person who was an aristocrat kind of story.
Yeah, it
And the
was. Yeah, but
character
I mean,
she
I think in
plays
the
in
'70s.
yeah, the character Ingrid plays in Countess Dracula is essentially, I don't know if they call her it, but that essentially is
Mhm.
is a supernatural version of Countess Bathory. And there's been tons of movies like Daughters of
Yeah.
Darkness, which we covered last Halloween on this channel.
Mhm.
And
And
the
these probably had an impact on this. I think that's what I'm saying.
Well,
They
I think
probably.
Hammer was starting to imitate the European movies. Uh, the European movies were much more graphic, much earlier, and much more into the sensuality and the lesbian. They really played up the Carmilla influence on these
Mhm. Yeah,
movies.
I
And so
remember.
did the
Hmm.
Spanish movies like Blood Spattered Bride. I
Mhm.
mean, Carmilla's like that came out like 25 years before Dracula, the novel.
Yeah.
So the lesbian vampire thing is its own subgenre of horror, but I think Hammer was generally pretty stodgy compared to European movies. And I think
Hmm.
this
Mhm.
is the period we're talking about where Hammer's like, oh, maybe we can get away with a little more sex and violence. Maybe we can make it a little more
Right.
sensual, a little more female centric, how.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a Karnstein
And
trilogy
this and
that's
this is also like the time of women's lib too. So I mean, this idea of this
mhm,
women, women taking charge and wealthy women trying to look younger. Because this is like when plastic surgery is really beginning to take off,
yeah.
and this really comes into being like I think what I'm going to be discussing, Once Bitten, that's a huge theme there. Like these, aristocratic women trying to look as young as possible.
Well, it's
Hmm.
still those are still popular. I mean, the lesbian
Mhm.
vampire thing is has never gone away at all. I mean, it's all the way up to now. And as far as the youth thing, I would think of the Neon Demon from recent years, which they're not exactly vampires, but they kind of are. Do you guys know
Mhm.
that movie where, she's
No.
a woman's trying to be a model? I think Dakota Johnson plays the main character, and she
When was this made?
just in the last 10 years or
Yeah.
less.
Okay. I
It's
know a similar one in Trapped Ashes, but it's slightly different. It's women getting a boob job.
well, this one
And
is she's trying to be a
these are
model.
like
Eh,
vampiric boobs.
Yeah, well, this one is kind of like a little more tasteful than that, but it's pretty gory. But I mean, it's very it's Nicholas Winding Refn, so it's got this whole he's European too, so it's got this whole and he's very into Mario Bava and all these. Neon Demon's photography is very similar to Mario Bava's. He and deliberately he uses the same thing I was talking about in Vamp, where he's got like the turquoise,
Mhm.
the hot pink,
Mhm.
the muted red, that same color spectrum, the kind of neon yellow. Um, but yeah, and
Okay, I'm
Neon
going to pay
Demon.
attention to that.
And plus the soundtrack is very electronic and yeah, I think Neon Demon it's not exactly a horror movie. I think there's kind of I mean it is a horror movie. It's not exactly a vampire movie, but they're kind of these weird creatures
Mhm.
who do kind of they're kind of like vampires, they're kind of like cannibals and they themselves are and they're women. They themselves are keeping themselves young by preying on other people and on the younger people that they're promising the eternal youth also. And
Mhm.
it goes badly for our main character for the most part. But it's also a meta commentary. Not that meta really. It's a kind of a blatant commentary on the shallowness of the fashion industry and all that stuff. So
Yeah. And isn't there like actually like I think a few years ago there was a story about how billionaires are not sucking blood, but they're trying to find this elixir for youth. So yeah, it
oh
really
yeah.
it does.
There's a lot we don't know about that's going on. I mean, 15 years ago, I would have said there absolutely are no snuff movies. That was a consensus among
Hmm.
anyone who researched this stuff. Now, I believe there really are snuff. The actual archetype where very rich people pay to have somebody kill, usually a woman, usually in a sexualized fashion on camera to distribute it to make money and for the sick pleasure of others. I mean, there's been enough documented criminals they've caught who've made them. It's just the only people who've
Mhm.
actually seen them have been the FBI, and
Mhm.
they make it illegal to even watch these things, So, but they're out there. Peter Scully, who did Daisy's Destruction, that's a great example of a real snuff movie. No one will ever see it. Some people have seen it a long time ago on the internet, leaked, but you can't. You're not going to see it because you'll go to prison if the FBI finds out.
Hmm.
But they were literal snuff movies. So yeah, I think the same thing. Yeah, adrenochrome and all this. People have been talking about eating the infant placentas for decades, and all these kind of witchy kind of things. But they're not really witchy in a good way. They're kind of there's always some innocent person suffering. Um, I use that a lot in my stories, but it's not really as I get older and add more to my stories and expand its lore. Real life is starting to not only catch up with me but outpace me. I've always
Hmm.
planned my stories to end in a world where I have revolution and an apocalypse. I planned that for 25 years, but now we're most of the things that I foresaw in my story are happening now.
Yeah.
So it's like, damn, I got to step up my game here, man.
Because now it's just so passe.
My story's more
Mhm.
hopeful. I
Yeah.
mean, because they're actual heroic people. Whereas in real life, I don't know. There are, but
No one
not.
wants to be a hero. I mean, no one wants to stick their neck out. They just want convenience.
Yeah, I mean the
Mhm.
tide is turning, but is it turning fast enough? You know, but as far as this kind of movie, yeah, that theme of that, yeah, women preying on the young and the lesbian vampire movies, you always have this kind of older, like Lamora. That's a great example. Lamora's made
Yep,
during the
yep,
height of these movies, and it was American, so
yeah.
Mhm.
but it was very squarely influenced by Daughters of Darkness, Vampires by Jose Larraz. It came out right after them or right around the same time. Um, and there's been tons and tons of,
Oh, Let's Scare Jessica to Death. That was 1971.
Yeah,
Excuse.
yeah.
yeah, a little
Another one.
later than that. But yeah,
No, I
yeah,
think it was early. It was very much like the early
yeah. You
70s.
you
But
covered that last Halloween on the show.
yeah,
Yes, and you also covered Grave of the Vampire. Remember?
yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
It was an interesting period. Yeah, the movie that I'm going to do next, not this time around, but it is a '90s movie, but it's very much a descendant of all of these tropes, and it's also a sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula the novel. And it was also produced by David Lynch. So some people watching probably know what movie I'm talking about, but we're gonna save a surprise. So, do you guys have any final thoughts on Captain Cronus Vampire Hunter?
Oh, other than it's kind of a wild movie. Not too much blood, but a lot of other things. In terms of the subject matter, yeah, I would say look into more of these types of movies. I think if you are on YouTube and you get one, you're going to get suggestions for others as well. And then there's
Yeah,
some
Yes,
really
I know.
cool interviews behind the scenes, stuff like that as well with some of the actors. I think that's also
yeah. I used
worth
to have the
looking
DVD.
into.
It didn't have a lot of extras, but I think the Blu-ray
Mhm,
does. But I haven't
mhm,
upgraded. I don't have the. I sold the DVD a while back, but I've only
mhm,
watched it maybe 3 times, and really, the last time I watched it all the way through has probably been 15 years. So,
mhm,
but I still came to it kind of late compared to a lot of people because everybody I knew was into Hammer and vampire movies and super heroic kind of movies were always
mhm,
talking about it, but I never had availability. It wasn't for rent many places when I was growing up or anything. So I finally just bought the DVD sight unseen about 20 some years ago. And
mhm,
I liked
mhm.
it, but some of the people like Bill and Keith on the channel and Tim are big fans of the movie. But have you seen this one, Chuck?
No, I have not. I think it's another one. Yet my wife's seen it. I haven't, but she fiercely recommends it. I
Okay.
think.
Well,
Excellent.
yes, Chuck's wife has great taste. Obviously, because she's married to him, but
It's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
don't be modest.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up this episode, and next time around we'll be back. All of us will be back, and we're gonna hear from Francis on some movies, from me and Chuck, Briggy, and some other folks will be back too. Bill Mulligan probably, and who knows, maybe some other people will pop up. So thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate you. And I think Briggy said she had a something she wanted to share with y'all. Um, ask you guys something to do something for us. What was it, Briggy?
Oh, like, share, subscribe, of course. Hit the like bell. Do what you got to do.
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, we'll see you soon with more vampires, more Halloween.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Bye.
watching.
Bye.
Have a good night.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.